Midnight calls. The first call. The clock on my nightstand blinked 11:59 p.m., its harsh red glow burning into my sleepless eyes. I had been staring at it for hours, feeling the weight of yet another sleepless night. Insomnia wasn't new to me, but lately, it felt like something more. A constant hum of unease vibrating through my chest. Then, at exactly 12 a.m., my phone buzzed. I froze. No one called me this late. Not my boss, not my few remaining friends. A sinking dread settled in my stomach as I hesitated before answering. My shaking fingers finally swiped the screen. "Hello!" My voice cracked. A distorted, rasping voice came through the line, low and gravelly but eerily familiar. "You have to listen carefully. It's me, yourself, 10 years from now. And if you don't do exactly what I say, you'll be dead by dawn." I pulled the phone away from my ear, staring at it like it had come alive. Dead by dawn? What kind of sick joke was this? The voice spoke again, sharper this time. "Don't hang up. I know you think this is a prank, but it's not. Look outside your window. Right now." My breath caught. Against my better judgment, I walked to the window, pulling the curtain aside. A figure stood beneath the flickering streetlight across the road. They were motionless, staring up at my apartment. My heart raced as I whispered into the phone. "What is that? Who is that?" The voice on the line responded coldly. "That's what's coming for you if you don't listen." The first instruction. I stumbled back from the window, the curtain swinging shut. My pulse thundered in my ears, drowning out the sound of my own voice as I demanded answers. "Who are you? What do you want from me?" "I told you. I'm you. 10 years from now. I can prove it if you want, but we don't have time for that. You need to trust me. Go to your kitchen. Open the drawer next to the fridge." "Why?" I whispered, my throat dry as sandpaper. "Just do it." Every instinct screamed at me to hang up, but the memory of that motionless figure under the streetlight sent shivers down my spine. Against my better judgment, I shuffled into the kitchen, phone pressed to my ear. I pulled open the drawer. It was empty except for a single, yellowed envelope I didn't remember putting there. Inside was a folded piece of paper. Scrawled across it, in my handwriting, was a single sentence. "Midnight is the beginning." The voice spoke again. "Burn the note. Now." "Burn it? Why?" "Because if you don't, they'll find you." Flames in the sink. My trembling hands flicked open my lighter as I stood over the kitchen sink. The note was yellowed, brittle, as though it had been aged for decades. The voice on the phone hissed urgently. "Hurry. They're getting closer." "Who? Who's getting closer?" The line crackled with static. "Don't waste time asking questions. Just burn it." I held the flame to the paper. For a second, nothing happened. Then, with a sudden whoosh, it ignited, the flames consuming it almost instantly. But the flames weren't normal. They burned green and blue, casting eerie shadows across the kitchen walls. And that's when I heard the knock. A single, heavy thud against my front door. Then another, and another. "Don't answer it," the voice snapped. "Why not?" I whispered, barely able to breathe. The knocking stopped. A scraping sound began, like nails dragging down the outside of my door. "Because they're not human. The unseen visitors." The scraping grew louder, more frantic. I backed away, clutching the phone like a lifeline. "What do they want? Why are they here?" "They're here because of the note," the voice replied. "You've already altered the timeline. That note was never meant to exist." "Then why was it there?" Silence. Then, softly, "Because something is wrong with the future." With me, the scraping suddenly stopped, replaced by an oppressive silence that pressed against my ears. I could barely hear the voice when it spoke again. "You need to leave your apartment. Now, go to the abandoned gas station 3 blocks away. Don't stop. Don't look back." Before I could respond, the call disconnected. I was left in the suffocating silence of my apartment, staring at my door. The air felt heavy, and I swear I heard faint whispering from the other side of the door. Swallowing my fear, I grabbed my jacket and keys. I didn't look out the peephole. I didn't want to see what might be there. The gas station, the The streets were eerily deserted as I made my way to the gas station. Every shadow seemed alive, every faint rustle of wind carrying whispers that made my skin crawl. I kept glancing over my shoulder, but no one followed me, or so I thought. When I reached the gas station, the windows were boarded up, the pumps rusted and covered in graffiti. The place had been abandoned for years. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I answered immediately. "You're here," the voice said. "Good. Now go to the payphone around the back." I rounded the corner and found the payphone hanging from the wall, its receiver dangling by the cord. The keypad was smeared with something dark and sticky. "I'm here," I said, trying to steady my voice. "What now?" "Dial 707, the voice instructed. "Why?" "Because it's the only way to find out what happens next." Reluctantly, I dialed the number. The line clicked, and for a moment all I heard was static. Then, a woman's voice came through. "He knows what you did," she said softly. "And he's coming for you." The line went dead. The wrong footsteps. I stared at the payphone, my fingers numb against the cold receiver. The woman's voice echoed in my head. "He knows what you did." Who was he? What had I done? My phone rang again. I almost didn't answer it, but something compelled me to. It was the same gravelly voice, the one claiming to be my future self. "You need to run." "What? Run from what?" The voice grew panicked. "Listen to me. There's no time. He's already there." The line clicked, and suddenly, I heard something behind me. Footsteps. Slow, deliberate, and heavy. I whipped around, but no one was there. The hair on the back of my neck stood on end as the footsteps continued, circling me, invisible. I backed away from the payphone, my breaths coming in short gasps. Then, a shadow moved at the edge of my vision. Something too tall, too distorted to be human. It lingered for a moment, then melted into the darkness. "Who's there?" I shouted, my voice cracking. Silence. I didn't wait to find out. I ran. The empty streets. The streets were eerily silent as I sprinted away from the gas station. My footsteps echoed unnaturally loud, and every time I glanced over my shoulder, I swore I saw that shadow darting between the pools of streetlight. It wasn't chasing me directly. It was playing with me, staying just out of sight, but always close enough to remind me it was there. My phone rang again. I answered, panting. "Where do I go now?" I demanded. The voice was calmer now, almost resigned. "There's an old church 2 miles north. You'll be safe there. For now." What's happening to me? What are these things? You don't want to know. I deserve to know. I screamed into the phone. There was a pause. Then, in a voice so soft I barely heard it, "They're from the gaps. Between time. Between us." The line went dead. The church that shouldn't be. I found the church exactly where the voice had said it would be, but something about it felt wrong. It was ancient, far older than anything else in the city. Its stone walls blackened with age and covered in twisting vines. The stained glass windows were intact but depicted strange, unsettling images. People with hollow eyes, a man with wings like a moth, and a spiral that seemed to move if you stared at it too long. The door creaked loudly as I pushed it open. The air inside was thick with the smell of mildew and something metallic. Blood? My footsteps echoed in the empty nave as I made my way toward the altar. A single candle burned there, casting flickering shadows that danced unnaturally on the walls. My phone buzzed again. I answered without hesitation. "What now?" "You need to stay there until 3:33 a.m. Don't fall asleep. Don't let the candle go out." "Why? What happens if I do?" "You don't want to know." The line went dead again. I stared at the candle, its tiny flame swaying as though caught in an invisible breeze. I sat down on one of the pews, my back to the door. That was my mistake. The watcher in the dark. The first hour passed in silence, but I could feel the weight of something pressing down on the church, as if the air itself was alive. The candle flame flickered more violently, and the shadows it cast began to take on shapes. Faces, hands, twisting mouths. I told myself it was just my imagination, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't alone. At some point, I heard the door creak open behind me. My blood ran cold. I didn't dare turn around. The footsteps began again. Slow, deliberate, and impossibly loud. They echoed through the church, coming closer and closer until they stopped directly behind me. My hands gripped the edge of the pew, my knuckles white. Then, a voice, low, guttural, and inhuman, whispered in my ear, "You're not supposed to be here." I spun around, but there was nothing there, just the open door, swinging slightly in the breeze. I grabbed my phone and dialed the number that had been calling me, desperate for answers. The line connected instantly. "Why is this happening to me?" I demanded. The voice on the other end sighed. "Because you broke the timeline, and they want to fix it." "Who are they?" "You don't want to know." A fractured timeline. The clock in the church struck 3 a.m., its chimes echoing like a death knell. I couldn't take it anymore. "I need answers," I shouted into the phone. "You keep saying I don't want to know, but I need to know." There was a long pause. Then, the voice on the other end spoke, quieter than before. "I tried to save her," it said. "Save who?" Another pause. Then, in a tone so broken it didn't sound like my voice at all. "The girl. The one who dies because of us. Because of what you'll do tomorrow." My stomach dropped. "What are you talking about? What happens tomorrow?" "You'll meet her. You'll make a choice. And everything will change." The line clicked off, leaving me in the oppressive silence of the church. The candle sputtered, its flame shrinking as if struggling to survive. For the first time, I noticed the faint sound of laughter, low, hollow, and echoing through the church. It didn't sound human. It sounded like it was coming from everywhere at once. The candle dies. The laughter grew louder, echoing off the ancient stone walls. I stared at the candle as its flame sputtered and twisted unnaturally, casting grotesque shapes on the church walls. My hands trembled as I gripped the pew. "Stay lit," I whispered, as if pleading with the flame would help. But my words were meaningless. With one final flicker, the candle went out. The darkness that followed wasn't normal. It wasn't just the absence of light. It felt alive, pulsating and cold, wrapping itself around me like a living thing. I scrambled to relight the candle, my hands fumbling with the lighter in my pocket. The voice returned, not from the phone, but from the darkness itself. "You shouldn't have let it go out." My lighter sparked to life, and the flame illuminated a face, pale, hollow-eyed, inches from mine. I screamed, dropping the lighter, and the figure vanished into the shadows. The girl in the photo. I didn't sleep that night. I stayed huddled in the pew, my phone clutched to my chest. When dawn finally broke, the oppressive darkness seemed to retreat, leaving behind a suffocating silence. I staggered out of the church, my mind racing with questions. I walked aimlessly for hours, lost in thought. The voice had said something about a girl, someone I was supposed to meet, someone who would die because of me. But how? Why? I ended up back at my apartment. As I stepped inside, I noticed something strange. My coffee table, usually cluttered with junk, was spotless except for a single photograph. I picked it up, my hands shaking. The photo showed a girl, no older than 20, with long dark hair and a shy smile. She was sitting on a park bench I recognized, one just a few blocks from my building. Scrawled across the bottom of the photo in red ink were the words, "Find her before 8 p.m. My phone buzzed. I answered it without hesitation. "Who is she?" I demanded. "You'll find out soon enough," the voice said. "But if you don't reach her in time, everything ends." The park encounter. I arrived at the park at 7:45 p.m., the photo clutched tightly in my hand. My eyes scanned the area, searching for the girl. The sun was beginning to set, casting long shadows across the grass. Families were packing up, children laughing as they chased each other. And then I saw her. She was sitting on the same bench as in the photo, staring down at her phone. My heart pounded as I approached, unsure of what to say. "Excuse me," I said awkwardly. She looked up, her eyes meeting mine. "Can I help you?" she asked, her voice soft but wary. I stammered, unsure of how to explain myself. You're in danger. Her brow furrowed. What are you talking about? Before I could answer, my phone buzzed again. I answered it, turning away from her. She's here, I whispered into the phone. Now what? The voice responded coldly. Get her out of there. Now. He's already watching. The watcher returns. I grabbed her arm, pulling her to her feet. You have to come with me, I said, my voice shaking. Are you crazy? Let me go. She protested, struggling against my grip. You don't understand, I hissed. There's someone watching us. We need to go. Now. Her resistance faltered, and her eyes darted around nervously. Who's watching us? She asked. As if in answer, a shadow moved at the edge of the park. It was him, the figure I'd seen before, the one who shouldn't exist. He was taller now, his limbs elongated and wrong, his face featureless except for two empty black holes where his eyes should have been. The girl saw him too. She gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. What is that? She whispered. Run, I said, pulling her along with me. We sprinted through the park, the shadow following us. No matter how fast we ran, it always seemed to be just behind us, its twisted form gliding effortlessly over the ground. The motel room. We didn't stop running until we reached a rundown motel on the edge of town. I paid for a room in cash and we barricaded ourselves inside. The girl sat on the bed, her arms wrapped around her knees. She looked at me with a mix of fear and suspicion. Who are you? She asked. My name's Alex, I said. And I think I just saved your life. Saved me from what? She demanded. What was that thing? I hesitated, unsure of how to explain everything. I don't know what it is, I admitted, but it's been following me for days. And now it's after you too. She stared at me, her eyes filled with disbelief. Why me? I don't know, I said, but I think it has something to do with your future. With our future. Before she could respond, the lights in the room flickered. A low hum filled the air, growing louder and louder until it became an unbearable roar. The shadow was here, the broken barrier. The hum grew deafening, rattling the walls of the motel room. The girl, Emily, as I'd learned during our panicked conversation, clutched my arm, her eyes wide with terror. The shadow loomed outside the window, its form stretching impossibly tall, pressing against the glass like it was testing the barrier. What is that thing? Emily whispered, her voice trembling. I don't know, but it's not human, I said, pulling her away from the window. The shadow didn't need to break the glass to enter. It seeped through the cracks, sliding across the floor like smoke. The air grew colder, and the lights flickered violently before plunging us into darkness. Stay behind me, I said, though I had no idea how I could protect her, or myself. The shadow solidified, forming a grotesque figure with twisted limbs and hollow eyes. Its mouth opened, revealing rows of jagged teeth that shouldn't have been able to fit in its head. It spoke, but its voice wasn't a voice. It was a chorus of screams and whispers. You don't belong here. The rift opens. I grabbed the lamp from the nightstand and swung it at the shadow. It passed through the creature like smoke, but the motion seemed to disrupt it momentarily. Run! I shouted to Emily, shoving her toward the door. We burst into the hallway, the flickering fluorescent lights above us casting eerie shadows on the cracked walls. The hum followed us, growing louder with every step. I glanced behind us and saw the shadow spilling out of the motel room like a tidal wave, its form stretching and twisting as it pursued us. Emily screamed as the hallway seemed to stretch impossibly long, the door to the exit growing farther and farther away. What's happening? She cried. They're warping the space around us, I said, though I didn't know how I knew that. It was like the voice on the phone had imprinted knowledge into my brain. Just keep running. Finally, we reached the exit door. I threw it open and we stumbled into the night. But the world outside wasn't the same. The sky was a swirling mass of red and black, and the buildings around us seemed to melt and twist like wax. They've opened a rift, the voice on my phone said suddenly, crackling to life. You need to close it, Alex, or neither of you will survive. The ritual. How do I close it? I shouted into the phone. You already have everything you need, the voice replied cryptically. But you need to trust her. She's the key. I looked at Emily, who was staring at me in confusion. Do you know what he's talking about? I asked. She hesitated, then nodded slowly. My grandmother used to tell me stories about things like this, about shadows from another world. She said they could be banished, but only if you had something to anchor you to this world. What does that mean? I asked desperately. Emily reached into her pocket and pulled out a small locket. It was my mom's. It's all I have left of her. That's it, the voice on the phone said. But you'll need to do exactly what I say. The instructions were bizarre. Draw a symbol on the ground with chalk, place the locket in the center, and light a fire around it, all while chanting words that didn't sound like any language I'd ever heard. But we didn't have a choice. The sacrifice. We found ourselves in the middle of an empty parking lot, the shadow circling us like a predator. I drew the symbol on the asphalt with the piece of chalk Emily had miraculously found in her bag. She placed the locket in the center, her hands shaking. I lit the fire with a match, the flames flickering blue and green. The shadows recoiled, hissing like steam hitting a hot pan. Emily and I chanted the words the voice had given me, our voices trembling but growing louder with each repetition. The shadow grew more frantic, its form splitting and shifting as it screamed in that terrible chorus of voices. It's working, Emily said, her voice filled with a mixture of hope and fear. But then the shadow lunged at her, its twisted arms reaching for the locket. Without thinking, I stepped between them, bracing for the impact. The shadow struck me, and pain exploded through my body, cold and searing at the same time. Alex, Emily screamed. Finish it, I shouted through gritted teeth. She hesitated for only a moment before grabbing the locket and throwing it into the fire. The flames roared to life, and the shadow let out an ear-piercing scream before it dissolved into nothingness. The final call. The world snapped back to normal. The swirling sky vanished. The buildings stood straight again, and the oppressive hum disappeared. Emily helped me to my feet, her eyes filled with tears. You saved me, she said softly. I shook my head. No, you saved us. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out, hesitating before answering. It's over, I said. The voice on the other end was quiet for a moment. Then it spoke. For now. What do you mean? I demanded. You've stopped them this time, but the timeline is still fractured. You'll hear from me again, Alex. And next time, it might not end so well. The line went dead, leaving me standing in the silence of the empty parking lot. Emily placed a hand on my arm. What now? She asked. I looked at her, the weight of everything pressing down on me. I don't know, I admitted, but whatever happens next, we face it together. As we walked away, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was still watching us. And deep down, I knew the voice on the phone was right. This wasn't over.